Matt, here we are. Here you are.
Here I am.
All right, here you are. So I'm going to pull the Q&A, making sure that everybody. Um, all right.
That's still on Slack.
Let's see if everybody's on Slack. So, hey guys, can you hear me and can you see me and Matt? If you're on the Q&A channel, just drop a one. I know they were wrapping up the chat. Oh, I got a
Looks like
one.
we got a one.
We got a one from Clark. All right, can hear good.
Hell
Except,
yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, Cinco Sis. It's either you get me on one side or you get Matt's track in mono. Uh, so
Might be better that way, honestly.
no, it sounded better in stereo. All right, so cool. Well, I am Loic Maestracci, the founder of Music Expo, and I am extremely excited to welcome Matt Leigh from Nashville, Tennessee. Um, Matt has spoken various times at our event in Nashville last year and the year before. And we were supposed to get together again for a third year this weekend, but we were not able to. But we're getting together via this mean. Matt, how are you today?
I'm good, Loic. Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're very very excited to have you and also to discuss, something so appropriate for today's summit. Because really, what we wanted to do is help everybody right now forced to work from their home studio to really try to get the best out of either their equipment or their room and try to sound as good as possible. I can tell you, we had a quick networking event just before, and everybody was talking about how can they make their track sound like radio ready. So you might get a lot of questions. So I know it might be a big gap between home studio and ready, but maybe you have some tricks. But anyway, if you're not familiar with Matt, Matt is actually a Grammy winning producer, engineer, and bassist. He worked with a lot of artists from Nashville, Willie Nelson, Daigle, Natalie Grant, and many others. He actually worked for a band that is based out of San Francisco called Planet Booty, which is an amazing
Woo!
band, which is great to see live. And right now, I think once in a while they do online sessions, so you can go check them out. Planet Booty. Matt, um, yeah, here we are. So
Here we are.
pass it to you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
tell us what you have to say.
Yeah, well, probably nothing important, but here we are, you know. So I really appreciate you having me again. Really love everything Music Expo is doing, and hopefully all of our viewers and listeners also feel that same value in what you guys are doing. So, Loic, really, really impressed. Keep it up. Today, though, we are going to talk about how do we make our home recordings and maybe things that aren't done in a traditional studio space. How do we make those sound absolutely awesome? And there are a few things that you just can't replicate in the home that you can in a professional recording studio. With that being said, though, with a lot of the tools, a lot of the great plugins that we now have, a lot of the great software that we have, it is much easier to get really quality results and get to a spot where you can have a radio quality performance that you did, in a bedroom. So the days of having to go to a studio to record are obviously long gone. With that being said, I want to caveat all of this with the the first and most important thing to any great recording is going to be having great talent. So, in my opinion, the key to great sound is making sure that you're finding the best musicians possible and that you're finding the best singers and the best talent possible because that's going to overcome a lot of these issues that we're talking about more than anything else. So, for instance, if you have less than stellar gear or you have less than stellar instruments, if you really shine on a certain instrument, that will overcome any of these technical things that we're going to talk about. So that's key point number one, is that the musician, the singer, and the artist, and even the song are going to dictate how this turns out better than anything else that we talk about. I would then argue that the second most important aspect of this is the quality of the instruments that you're recording on. So, if you take a really great musician and then they also have a really great instrument, that combination right there will typically overcome all of these other technical things that we're going to talk about. Then, where I find most of the issues that arise in recording at home come from the room that the music is recorded in. So, typically speaking, where most home studios differ from a professionally designed studio is in the room and the room treatment. And, there are some things we can do to fix that.
Matt, can you hear me? Did we lose Matt? The surprise of live. Hold on, did we lose Matt? Bear with us, guys. Matt? I'm You guys, you don't hear Matt, but can you hear me? Just drop a 1 if you can hear me. Matt?
Hey,
All right, we lost you for a second.
of course. It works perfectly until it really matters, right?
Yes, okay. Now, can you drop a 2 if you hear Matt now? I'm asking to check. Drop a 2 if you hear Matt. Matt, just speak. Oh, you see him.
Hey, check. Hello.
Okay, great. You're back. Thank you, Ryan.
All
All right, we're back. You were saying, so the most important, the main difference between the home setting and the professional recording studio is the room itself and the room treatment. And that's where we lost you.
Okay. Well, man, I give you guys all the most important stuff right after that, and I don't remember what I said, so sorry. No, I'm just kidding. Um, so what I was saying is that I think those three things will affect your sound more than the gear that you have. So, it's if you don't have super expensive microphones or you don't have super expensive preamps or you just have an interface, that to me is the least important aspect to getting great sound at home or getting great sound outside of a recording studio. Um, and sometimes maybe we don't have the ability to, hire a musician or any of that stuff. Unfortunately, the reality of it is you are going to be at the mercy of whatever talent level you have or you're utilizing for that project, and there's no replacing that. So I want to make sure that we keep that in mind as we work through this. But with that being said, um, those are the things that I think where we really need to look at, and where it really comes into play for home recording is in the room that you are recording in. So most rooms in a house or most rooms in a non-studio spot are usually just a big box. And as you all, I'm sure, are aware, that when we record in a place with parallel walls, we typically have lots of room reflections and unpleasant sound. We tend to have maybe more reflective surfaces than we would in a studio where we have a combination of absorption and reflection, diffusion, all of those acoustic words. And so where I see problems is in one or the other. One, people don't have enough room treatment, or they have too much. So I think there's a happy medium, and it's going to be different for every single room. But I think it's worth creating maybe a few panels, or maybe a few absorption areas, as well as a few reflective areas. And you're going to have to take the time to figure out what's best for your space. Like I said, one or the other, completely bare or completely covered in acoustic foam or acoustic insulation. Neither of those are the right approach. I think a little bit of either will do you just fine. The other major areas that I tend to find in home recordings are in cymbals. So that's where you really, in my opinion, where it really tells me, hey, this was done in a non-recording space. And the reason being is that cymbals get really, really harsh in a small room and in a room that's either over-treated or not treated enough. And so, we'll look at, I've got an example here that I'm going to get to in a few minutes. But some of the things that you can overcome with cymbals is either getting a less bright pair of cymbals, finding one that's maybe a little bit darker. I know all the cymbal manufacturers typically make some variations of a darker sounding cymbal. I also know that, sometimes the microphones that you're using can also cause your cymbals to get really, really harsh, especially dynamic and condenser mics. So if you have the means or you have the ability to pick up or even rent some ribbon mics, that can really help to tame some of that harshness and really kind of mellow that out. And I've seen that time and time again where, even if you get a cheaper ribbon mic, put that as your overheads, that might help fix some of those problems that might be arising from your room. The other big issues that I tend to find come with vocals, where you will tend to have a vocal that has too much room noise in it, where there's too much reflection and you're getting almost kind of like an echo or almost kind of like some slapback in a room that's not treated for doing vocals, or a room that's not treated for recording. And there are some things we can do to help fix that as well. Usually some editing will help clear that up. Some gates, some expanders might help there. But those are maybe some of the things that you can help fix. And then the last thing that becomes more of an issue of not wanting to piss off your neighbors, or maybe you do, maybe you don't have a good relationship with your neighbors and you're saying, screw you, is not being able to turn things up loud enough. So if you are in an apartment or you are in a spot where you can't crank your guitar as loud as you would like and get that really rich distortion and that saturation and those great tones from, turning the amp all the way up to 11 or 12, that can also affect how things might sound. And so what you can do with that is you can actually, there are so many great amp simulators out there, and there's so many great analog model plugins now that can really help to overcome some of these primary issues. So that's really where we're going to start with those things in mind. And I have these two things on the screen. Can you guys see my screen? Do I need to reshare? I probably need to reshare.
Yeah.
All right, let me do this.
I'll put you back on once. Yeah.
Cool.
Once I see your session, I'll put on the live stream.
Can you show this?
Yeah, your bank account? Absolutely.
Well, there's nothing in there, so hopefully that's a ploy to get people to donate to what I'm doing here. But can you guys all see this? Okay.
Drop a one if you can see the website, which I think it's Bandcamp. Yeah. Drop a one if you see Bandcamp.
Great. Thank you for confirming.
Thank you.
So this was a recent project that came across my path this past summer. One of my good friends here in Nashville, Tennessee, named Jim Ivins, decided, hey, I've got all this free time. There's no music, unfortunately, happening in Nashville right now. I've got a bunch of great friends here in Nashville that are also looking for something to do. Some music creators, producers, all that stuff. Wouldn't it be cool if we put together this collaborative album where, we come up, I'll write a song or have other friends write songs, and we'll send them around to different groups of people and produce and mix and master all of these different tracks. And so he had this idea coming up with Quarantunes, which is, here's a picture of the album, and then decided, I'm going to put this up on Bandcamp, and I'm going to donate any proceeds that we earn from this directly to COVID Relief and MusiCares, who do a lot of really great work for musicians, especially right now where a lot of creative people are really struggling. So it's really, really great what he decided to do. And I believe actually a couple of the other presenters today also helped on this record. But if you're feeling generous, I'm sure that he would love the donation or the shout out or the follow, whatever you can help with. That would be awesome. But anyways, that's kind of the backstory to this. Jim has been kind of a beacon of really a lot of driving force behind the rock music scene in Nashville right now. He's super involved and knows everybody. So if you're looking to get involved in the rock scene in Nashville, he's definitely the guy to reach out to. But so he sent me this song called All Coming Back that he had a couple people put onto this. And so I'm going to play you the tracks that he sent me to mix, and then we can talk about where I saw some of the issues, and then let me play you the finished mix, and then we can dive into the plugins and some of the different technical things that we did to make this. So here is this song.
And
Let's
Matt,
see if this.
we're gonna,
Yes, sir.
for the first few seconds, we're gonna make sure that the levels are good, and we're gonna get confirmation from the team on Slack. Okay.
Okay.
And there's a question actually. If you can ask your question because it's very appropriate here. Marcus is asking, which format did he send the track?
Hey, Marcus, great question. So Jim sent me WAV files. So he actually, I think, maybe recorded this in Logic, and he exported this group of tracks. So from the kick track down to the background track, he had sent me all of these as WAV files, and I turned around and arranged it in my session so that it worked within my mixing workflow. But this is what he sent me, and these were all of the tracks down here. That's pretty standard. Most people will send WAV format files if you don't work in the same DAW. I pretty much exclusively work in Pro Tools, even if I'm creating or composing or any of that stuff. So I typically need people just to send me topped and tailed WAV files, which means that they all start and stop at the same spot, even if there is silence in between these different tracks.
What's the term?
Topped and tailed. I believe that's what NARIS, the Grammy organization, uses to say that each of these are going to start and stop in the same location, so that if I was to open this up in any DAW, each of these tracks would still play back in their correct spot. What you don't want to have is a bunch of different clips, and especially you don't want to have things that aren't labeled correctly. That is another big issue that I tend to see in these scenarios. That's a great question.
Thank you. I was wondering if there was a term for that. So
that's a term I've always heard. People might say something else. The big thing is just making sure that all of your tracks start at the same spot, and making sure that you have them consolidated is a big part of that. So, all right, awesome. Great question. Thanks for the question, Marcus. So let me go ahead and play this for you, and then I can talk to you about some of the things that I heard, and then I'll play you the final mix, and then let's dive into the signal chains and specifics. All right, here we go.
Says you're disconnected.
Were you guys hearing that?
No.
Or do I need to? No, you weren't. Okay. Let me check this out.
Now you're connected.
Always a technical issue. Murphy's Law. Are you hearing that?
I am. Drop a 1 if you can hear the song. And actually drop a 2 if you can hear in stereo. Great.
Getting used to the fabric of the wanting and needing, and all the familiar roots of my mind that leads me all back to willful retreating. But I'm standing on the ground and it isn't hard till you're leaving. Same situations you had open guarded, letting them back and you willful succeeding. Yet it's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and never will find it. I never will find you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and listen in time. I never will be you. Ignore these nostalgical collectors that keep blowing up our phone with their lectures. And I must admit to the board of directors, I live in my life in a fragile standard. Yet it's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and making my mind. I'll never make you lose. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and making my mind. I'll never fight you. Yo, oh, we had a gun. We had a gun, and why our lives were all white now. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back, and I will never know what to do. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back. I'll make up my mind. I never will leave you.
All right. Pretty awesome stuff, huh?
So Matt, this is what you received from Jim.
This is what Jim sent me. So these were the initial tracks without any processing on them. These were the different parts that the musicians that collaborated on this all put together at their home studios and sent to me, and I got the chance to compile this. And so they all sent it in WAV file format. I saw a question earlier that said, what happens if they send MP3s? Well, tell them to export in a WAV format and mix it that way. MP3 does not sound good when you start to compress it and you start to do different things. You want to make sure that they're sending it to you in some form of high resolution audio. So this is what I got, and
There's
a couple
another question
errors.
actually, if
Yep.
you don't mind, because it's a good question from Marcus again. Main vocal is dry.
Yeah, again, this is what I was sent. So typically speaking, I would probably prefer a home recording to be dry without,
Okay.
unless they have specific plugins or things that they want me to use in the final mix, I typically would prefer that.
And do you know how he recorded the vocals? What
I
was
would
the change?
imagine just a single microphone directly into an interface. I didn't have much information about what was used on any of this stuff. I just received it, and my thought is what I'm listening to is it sounds like it's just a vocal mic right into an interface. I could be wrong about that, but to my ear, that's what it sounded like.
And do you know if Jim is still in good terms with his neighbors?
I think he is. Well, if you'll notice, so he did all the guitar parts and he did all the background vocals. And what I thought was interesting is that all of the guitar parts are actually DI'd. So he was using an amp simulator in the program he was working with, but he took all of his stuff off. He's like, I want you to kind of reimagine this, kind of reproduce these guitar parts. But if we just listen to the guitars, So those don't sound great. The guitar parts are all what's DI'd. So he direct inputted those either into his interface, or he had a direct input box that he plugged into his preamp or his interface. And then I believe what he told me is that when he recorded the track, he had an amp simulator pulled up on Logic, but again, didn't like the sounds, wanted me to address those. And so I went through on the guitar parts, and I have a couple really great amp simulators that I like. I like Native Instruments' Guitar Rig 5. I think they just updated that to number 6 now. There's a lot of great sounds in there. And then I also use a lot of Slate plugins, and I like their THU amp simulator. So in the final version, it's a combination of Guitar Rig from Native Instruments and Slate's amp simulator. One other thing I want to point out are the drums here. So if you listen to these, let me go especially to where the toms are playing. So those don't sound awful. I mean, those sound fine.
I mean,
The drummer.
Or recorded at home?
These were recorded at home. Yeah, these were done in somebody's home studio.
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, again, not bad. Where you can really hear some of those things I'm talking about, though, what I was talking about earlier, is here in the cymbals, or in the overheads, I should say. So let's listen to those real quick. So when I listen to this, I'm hearing both the harshness of the cymbals and all of that extra room reflection that I was talking about. I really hear it on the toms as well. You can really hear the room that this drummer recorded their tracks in. Let me solo those up real quick. So I feel like I'm getting a lot of reflections in that sound, and so that's something we wanted to address in the final mix as well. And then let me solo up this vocal for you. The same thing happens with this vocal. This was done the vocalist would have been done in a different space, and this I don't know. Like I said, I don't know his exact signal chain, but you listen for again the sound of the room that he is recording in.
I'll never find you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back in less than a time. I never will see you.
So you can really hear what that the room that person did their tracks in, and so we want to try to reduce that when we get to the mix stage. Same thing, I think, so Jim did all the background vocals, and if I remember correctly, he actually recorded these pretty well. He's got a lot of experience doing the home recording thing, and I think his were actually pretty tight and pretty dry. Let's listen to his real quick.
It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back.
So to me, that sounds really solid. If you can get your vocals to that level at home, I think you have the ability to take it even further. Now, before we do anything else, let me go ahead and play you the finished version now that we've heard a lot of these things, and then we can dive into individual signal chains. So let me go ahead and find that. Let me turn this off, and let me go ahead and disengage each of these tracks. Just in case. So let me go ahead and make those inactive. Okay, now let's listen to this final product.
situations you haven't forgotten. Let it all back and you will still succeed. Yeah, it's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and never will find it. I'll never will find you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and listen, it's all will never will be you. Well, that's just not business time. The typical collectors that keep blowing up our phone with their lectures. And I must admit to the board of directors and living my life in a fragile size. That it's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and making my mind. I'll never make you lose. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back and making my mind. I'll never will find you. No, we had a gun. We had it done. And why our lives were always It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back, and I will never know what to do. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back, and it's coming on. I'll never believe you.
So that was what we ended with. That was the final mix. We
Let's-
did a couple revisions.
Let's drop
But-
a clap if you enjoyed that mix, guys. Let's drop a clap or whatever. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that everybody, it looks like people enjoyed the track and definitely notice
Yeah.
the improvements.
Yeah. Thanks for the kind words, guys. So there are obviously maybe some things that make this sound like it came from maybe the early 2000s, and that was intentional. Jim sent me a list of about 2 to 3 tracks that he was kind of modeling this after. And he said, hey, I want the sonics to, have a little bit of a modern flair, but I wanted it to kind of have a throwback feel too. So there were certain creative choices that were made to make it sound like it might have been done back in the mid 2000s, as opposed to a rock track that might have been done today. And you can tell, I mean, there's not a ton of tracks in this. I think there's about 25, 30 tracks, something like that total. But this was a ton of fun to mix. And so I want to show you a couple things. I'm going to bounce over to the drums. Let me pull up that same section we highlighted when we were listening before. And let me show you here. So this is what I ended up doing with the drums. I ended up, I love the new folder feature in Pro Tools, by the way. I think that is one of the coolest things that they've come out with in the last couple years. But let's listen to the drums now in that same little section with those toms. Okay, so you'll notice that is a huge difference. The drums are now punchier. They smack really hard. It sounds like this was done in a room now. It sounds like this was done in a big studio, and that was intentional. So one of the things that I love about a lot of the plugins that we now have is we can fake, well, you can't fake being in an actual studio, but we can get close to making it sound like it was done in a real space. So I took all of these drums and I routed them to a track that I called Room, and I have that right here. And so I ended up, for this, I ended up setting up I used VMR on almost every track on this session because, I was trying something new, and I really love the Neve, the Neve emulations that Slate has come out with. And so almost every track has this 1173 or 1073 emulation of the preamp, and I think almost every track in this session has that as the first plug for each chain, along with the virtual channel, which just kind of gives us some of that console saturation. But for this room track, I pulled up the Teldex studio in Berlin, here in Altiverb. Altiverb is what's called a convolution reverb, and what they've done is they've gone in and they've modeled all of these different spaces, and so you can actually get this to sound like it is done in any different space. They also have things like churches and concert halls and even cars and trains and gear and different emulations as far as that goes. So this was one way that I could actually make these tracks sound like that. Let me actually just play you just that room track. So by itself, doesn't sound maybe what you'd want it to, but when you blend that in with the rest of the drums, you get kind of that big, huge studio sound. Another trick that you might try is a lot of people will put up like a mono room mic or a mono drum kit mic, where they will place a microphone kind of right maybe 6, 7, 10 feet in front of a drum kit and point it towards the drummer. And you can actually also recreate that. I actually used a ton of plugins for this one, but let me pull up this chain for you so you can see what I did here. That's actually a picture of the studio I used to work at. Had one of the best sounding drum rooms before it closed, sadly, back in April. But here are a bunch of things that I did here, and then I added a few. Let's see. Well, I'm working on a different computer than what I normally work on, but so obviously a lot of stuff going on here. Ended up kind of doing the first 4 or 5 plugins as here's the room sound, and then these bottom 3, the delay, the devil lock, and the gate, end up being kind of more of the effects for this track. So let me solo this up for you. Let me do this real quick, and then you can hear what this sounds like. Maybe. Actually, no, I don't know what's going on there, so let me just bypass that. But so those 2 things are really where a lot of the drum sound is coming in here. And then finally, I took my snare drum track and sent that to arguably the best drum sound. Maybe one of the best things that came out of the 80s is the AMS Non-Lin 2. That is one of those kind of gated reverb sounds that just sounds larger than life. And let me solo up the snare drum here and the reverb. And again, I'm just sending a little bit of my snare drum tracks here. And this was actually something that you'll notice that I have a few extra tracks of snare drum. I actually didn't use any samples on this. This is actually the way the snare drum came to me, was this track right here. So that's how it came to me. And then and that's a very usable snare drum sound. However, I felt like we could really beef it up and make it sound even bigger. And so one of the things that I saw Vance Powell do this on a mix a while back. He will take his snare drum on certain mixes and split it off into two separate devices. He'll split it off into, so he'll molt it or multiply it or create a bus, and we'll send one copy to a distressor, and he'll send one copy to a transient designer. And so what he's doing is he's basically parallel compressing this twice. And I think it makes your snare drum just sound absolutely massive. So let me play a little bit of that. Let me turn off this other reverb here. All right, so this is what happens when you add in these extra compressors to your snare drum. So that's without it. So you get that really nice kind of thickness. The distressor is helping to add some thickness. And the Transient Designer, I've got the attack turned up and the sustain turned down, really helps to add a little bit more of that smack, that top end. So both of these, this was a great trick. Again, thanks Vance Powell for sharing that with us. And I did that both for the snare drum and the kick drum. So the kick drum also was not bad right out of the gate. You know, it sounded fine. It sounded fine, but I felt like, you know, again, there's a lot of room sound in that, and there's a lot of bleed. So bringing up a gate can really help to get rid of some of that bleed and really help to tame some of that. So if we listen to it now with the gate on. So my goal here is I'm really trying to get rid of a lot of that bleed and a lot of that extra stuff. And then a little bit of EQ to help, you know, kind of tame it out and bring out a little bit more of that snap in the kick drum. And then, like I said, a little bit of analog saturation. So, and then on the two tracks that I'm sending to here, I'm also doing the same thing with that distressor and adding a little more EQ to add a little bit more body there. And then I'm also doing that here with this Transient Designer. So you can see, I mean, I'm really bringing out a lot of the attack here. This is those really rock heavy drums. And so I really wanted it to have that big snap and that huge low end. So let's listen to that. So you guys get an idea of that. And then that is actually, all the drums are then being compressed a second time. I have a parallel drum bus set up that I'm using this API 2500 to just smash the hell out of it. And that's being blended into the overall drum mix. So a lot of drum processing. Unfortunately, if you're not recording in a space, it does take a lot of work, a lot of compression, a lot of analog saturation. Just a lot of some fancy routing with the fake room mic and the fake mono room mic. So all of those things will help to get you that big, huge, modern drum sound, I guess. The toms, again, added some, like we talked about, really wanted to get rid of that room tone. So took out some of the sustain, compressed it, then added just a tiny bit of analog distortion with the decapitator. And then the EQ, there was a big, huge resonance right here at about 350. So I took that out. And that's what leads to this sound. Let me play a little bit of the bass. So that was the final product, and where we started was actually right here. So what I'm doing on the bass now is I am compressing the main DI track that Jim sent me. Again, some analog saturation. Like I said, I think this plugin is on every single track. And then I duplicated the DI track that he sent me and used an amp simulator. Maybe it will work. There we go. To bring out a little more grit and a little more distortion and a little more low end. Blended that in with the main track. So let's see what that sounds like. So it really helps to bring out some of that top and some of those notes. Then I duplicated it one more time, rolled off some of the low end because I think I had that sufficient, and then distorted it even more. So now I'm taking kind of the top end and really, really transforming it to even more distortion. So let me go ahead and add that in. And really what this does is it allows you to really hear those intricate notes that they're playing. And then this is another thing that I saw somebody do a long time ago, and I picked it up, is that if you want to make the bass not feel like it's quite so right in your face, add a little bit of delay. So send it to a delay, roll off some of the low end, and go ahead and listen to the depth that it adds. So again, that's really subtle, but if you want to kind of take that bass part and really kind of push it back, give it right around a 30 millisecond delay time and make the left and right just slightly different. And that will give you a little bit more of that depth on the bass, so it's not quite directly in your face. And this also now feels to me like it was done in a room that was meant for recording. Marcus, was there any Melodyne or similar used by you or the client? So yeah, I actually used Autotune Pro for this session. It seemed to get the job done just fine for what I was trying to do. And usually I will set it to the key of the song. So this song was in B minor. And one of the things I actually did with the vocal here is that I actually multed the vocal or duplicated the vocal and then tuned one at 100%, a 0 retune speed, and then tuned the other at a little bit more subtle tuning at 33, and then combine these two to give kind of a more, a more doubled sounding vocal, I guess might be the best way to put that. So let me play you a little bit of that.
It's all coming back to you. It's all coming back, and never will find it. I never will find you. It's all coming back to you.
So Autotune for this situation did a great job. I usually typically we use Autotune if I'm either trying to get the effect or if I'm trying to tune something quickly. I also use Melodyne pretty exclusively. And so those two things kind of really helped to bring the vocals in. Couple other things, the guitars, we heard where they started. Let me show you where we ended on those, because I think it was a massive change from where we began. So you see a big, huge change there. Like I said, I used a bunch of different amp simulators. I actually will print those as they're coming along. Oh, Jim Monk, my cousin. What's up, dude? Does the final mix just include wet effects or a lot of pitch and time correction? Jim, mostly a lot of effects. So all of these gray tracks that you see, these are all of the different effects that I used. And the way I tend to set up my mixes is that I will leave my effects with that track grouping. So for instance, my drums, I have that room track, my mono track, and my drum verb, and I keep that with my drum group just so that I can keep organized while I'm mixing. And then my guitar tracks here, I have another kind of room mic, so kind of faked. If I was to set these guitar amps up into a studio, what would that sound like? And this is East West Studios, formerly Cello Studios. And so that sounded really cool. A lot of great rock records have been done there. Use some delay on these guitars, and then some more 480L. The guitar hall presetting on that is pretty awesome. I think I just used that for and that's for all of them. A little bit's going to the reverb there. On my vocals, so I have. Let me show you my vocal chain because I know a lot of people really like to see that. So there is that. We saw Autotune already. I'm not going to show that because it's such a big plugin. De-esser to help get rid of some of those DS sounds or those S sounds. LA2A, which is one of my favorites, especially the CLA one. And then the RVox. So not a ton of processing in terms of the vocal itself. Mostly what we're doing here is just trying to keep things packaged really nicely and take out some of those anomalies that may have come from the just recording in a home space. But a little EQ, adding a little bit of the presence range or a little bit of the audible frequency range, taking out a little bit of that low mid, and then rolling off a lot of the bottom end. One of the things that you'll find is that home recordings, you tend to get a lot of buildup, especially if you're recording in a room that doesn't have you don't have the ability to turn the AC off, or you have a refrigerator in the background, or you have a lot of things buzzing. Your high pass filter becomes one of your best friends because now you can get rid of a lot of that rumble and a lot of that stuff that is just going to muddy up your track and make it hard to hear some of those other aspects of it. The vocal that I've duplicated, added a little bit of distortion with Mac DSP Futzbox, and then took out a bunch of S with the FabFilter Pro DS. And then the screen vocal, this one was probably one of my favorites to work on. This is, so again, that preamp and the channel, and then some RVox, and then this is a great plugin, Trash 2 by Isotope. You can come up with some really, really awesome sounds on this. So let me play this and show this to you guys. That would be this guy right here.
Oh, we had a gun! We had a gun, and why? Our lives were away now!
So that is really nasty, and I really love the way that turned out. But if, let me bypass all those plugins, you can hear the original again.
Oh, we had a gun! We had a gun, and why? Our lives were away now!
So anyways, that's pretty much that. I am using some doubling on both vocals. I am using some delay, and I'm using some 480L from Slate. So let me get to some of these questions.
And actually, there's Matt. There's one that was a bit higher that I want to lose sight of it because it's quite
Okay.
interesting. From Marcus again, how much forth and back was there between you and the client regarding the artistic mix / effect choices?
So I thought I did touch on that just slightly, but there was it was probably an hour, 30-minute conversation,
Yeah.
maybe 15, 20, 30-minute conversation about, what is your vision for this project? What are the sonics that you're looking for? Are there any reference tracks that that you really you really hope to have as a target. And so, that will be an initial conversation I'll have before I ever start mixing this project. And that should be something that you do either for yourself, sit down and write out goals and say, hey, I want this to sound like this, and this, or, here's 3 tracks that, we're not trying to copy it exactly, but sonically they match our vision for this song. And so that's really what you want to try to do before you start mixing. So that's kind of the goal there. Did I notice much difference between Autotune Pro and Waves Tune? To be honest with you, Tony, I have never used Waves Tune, or I think I used it maybe 10 years ago or something. So I honestly can't answer that for you, but I really like Autotune Pro. I think, if you're trying to get the Autotune sound, or if you need a fast and a quick tuning, that is the way to go, in my opinion. But I'm sure the Waves Tune works great, so that could be a great option as well. Did you start the mix with Mixbus Processing or just add at the end? So I actually typically always have kind of the same Mixbus. I usually will go with 2 versions of VCC. That's actually something a trick I found in the manual for VCC that Stephen Slate mentioned. And you'll notice most of my Mixbus is actually all Slate plugins. I really love the tape machine. I really love the virtual bus compressors. And then I really like using this Brainworks mastering EQ. And you'll notice I'm rolling off a little bit of the top end. The cymbals really started to get really harsh as I started to compress the drums a little bit. And so I wanted to make sure this had kind of more of that classic sound and classic vibe. And by rolling off just a little bit of that top will help you to achieve kind of more of that analog type sound. All right, let's see.
We have time maybe for one more question.
Okay, and then I'm happy to stick around and answer the questions on Slack after this. So I will go ahead and stick around a little bit after we jump off of here. All right, Jim Groff, if the client is sending you stems and does want a very specific effect on theirs, or if theirs on a certain track, would you prefer them to send both a dry stem and a wet stem? Jim, honestly, if they have something that they love, I would prefer that they send me the one without the options. So send it printed with the effects, send it however they have envisioned it, and send it, the way they want it. If they've taken the time to work it out a specific way, then I want to make sure that I get that into their final mix. Now, if they send me the tracks and say, hey, here is kind of where we were headed, this isn't necessarily the finished product, but this is where, this is kind of around the idea of what I'm thinking of, then in that case, it is great to get a dry version, because then I can start from scratch and either re-envision it completely, or I can tell them, hey, the original is going to be fine. This sounds great. We can make this work. So really, that's going to be up to the client, and I tell them, if you send me an option, I'm going to pick, unless they explicitly say, hey, here's what's going on here. Here's what I'm trying to do. So hopefully that helps out a little bit, but I usually leave that up to the person sending me the tracks.
Right. Matt, thank you so much. Stick around if you don't mind for the last few questions. We're going to transition now to Amir.
Of course.
Always great to have you here. Really, always a pleasure. And thank you so much for joining us from Nashville, for sharing the session. Clearly, there's clearly an improvement between the two. We share actually the link to the Bandcamp